Okay, welcome into the shop, everybody. Now I've got a pretty exciting project going here. I'm building actually something for my wife. It's going to be, I think it's going to be pretty cool. It's going to be basically a divided light frame that holds our kids' art. I call it a divided light. It's not a true divided light, but it is broken up into individual sections for each little piece of art. Now I'm starting by building the frame, and we're going to cut the joinery in the corner. And this is going to be kind of a bridle joint. Here's a SketchUp file of it. Not a great SketchUp drawing, but this shows you the joint. It's a double tenon bridle joint. I've actually used this joint quite often, and it's a pretty cool joint. So I start by cutting it on my Lee FMT router jig. I'm cutting the short end, so these are what I would call the tenons. And basically this jig allows me to do that by following a template. I'm using a 3/8 spiral upcut bit. And basically cutting at the maximum cutting capacity. I think it'll cut 1.25 inches, and that's what I'm cutting these down to. So it's kind of a scary cut. You gotta white knuckle it a little bit, and then you get comfortable with it and you realize it's controllable and not a big deal. So I'll cut all 4 of those. I lay my frame out on the floor just to help me keep organized. It's real easy to get parts off and cut apart in the wrong spot. Don't want to do that. So just finished the bottom rail. Going to do the top rail now, and this is a good view of how that looks, how that cuts. You see that? I mean, you're cutting a full 1.25 inch depth with the plunge router through solid wood. It's kind of an uncomfortable feeling, although I promise you, if you've done it before, you know it's controllable and safe. It's hard to explain how this jig works, but it basically has a template, and there's a pin on that attachment to the router that rides on that template. You can look this thing up. I'll put a link in the description. They're not affiliated with this post in any way, but I've used that jig for probably 8 years. It's a good jig, good piece of equipment. So the only downside to it is when you got to do long pieces, it becomes a real huge pain. And so here you can see me. I've raised it up on a stool, and I am gonna have to make. You have to raise it up to clear the piece to get it into the jig. Oftentimes when I have really long pieces like aprons for tables, I'll put this on my drill press and angle it. It's a huge pain, so I only really use it on short stuff. So this is going to be the mating piece. Basically we're cutting mortises here, and so that template I was telling you about, the pin rides on the outside of the template to cut the tenons, and then it has a little slot on the inside of the template that just runs the router one axis back to forth, and that cuts the mortises, matching mortises. I do quite a bit of test work before I jump into this. You can adjust the amount. There's a pin, that pin is tapered, so you raise it and lower it, it changes the amount it cuts, and you got to dial it in. You got to do a test cut. So the next thing I got to do is cut mortises for the what I'm calling the divided lights, basically the grill, which separates each individual piece of art. These are all 3/8, so I just used the 3/8 mortising bit and make a single plunge. There's 22 of them total, and I'm not going very deep. I think I'm cutting 5/8 of an inch deep. You don't have to go deep because these just need to capture the ends of the grills, which will make more sense when we get further along. I'll show you here in a bit how I laid them out. I'll do it on the short pieces, but basically I just am plunging into my layout line. There's no stops or anything set on the mortiser other than the fence, which controls the front to back positioning of the mortise. Sorry if I sound a little nasally. It is spring in Texas, and my allergies are driving me crazy, so I sound a little weird. So here I am laying it out. Anytime you're dividing something out, you use dividers. You should have a drawer full of these in your shop. These are really good. I'm using a large pair and a small pair. So basically what I'm doing is dividing the space out and then dividing out where the actual wooden grill goes. So the small one will divide the mortise, and then the big one divides the space between the mortise. And if I got it right, it'll hit right on the shoulder of that tenon, which it does. And that's the great thing about dividers. You can just tweak them and step it off multiple times till you get it divided perfectly. And then I use a pencil and just go to where I put the point of the divider in the wood and mark off my line. Probably should be using a marking knife here, but I've got my pencil out. If you sharpen the tip really sharp, you can actually put it in the point of the divider and register it perfectly. That's a little tip. So same thing as we did on the long piece, just drop it into the mortiser and make quick work of it. This thing will plunge these out really fast. If you did not have a mortiser, you could use a drill press and then square off the holes. You could cut them out with a chisel only, which would take you a long time, but it's definitely doable. So now we got to cut those divider pieces, the grills. So I'm going to mark off, I'm going to cut dados in these boards. And these boards are going to, basically we're going to rip these parts out of these boards. Let me start this. So I've milled 2 boards. One is wide enough, if I rip it, I'll get all the divided pieces for the width. And then one is wide enough, if I rip it, I'll get all the divided pieces for the long run. What we'll do is mark out our dados. We're transferring them from our mortises because they need to match that exactly. And this is going to make sense as we get further along. And then we're going to cut dados in this board, which will eventually become half laps. Once we rip these pieces out, they'll just fit into each other, and you'll get the grill. You'll get the divided light. So I set up the dado stack to 3/8. Basically, just put the 2 side cutters in a chipper in the middle, and a single pass will get the width I need. And I'm doing the same thing here. I'm not setting up any fences. I'm just eyeballing it. When you do these things, you can have a little deviation. You can get off a little bit. If you get off too much, you're going to see it, which is going to be really annoying. But there's some flex and bend to these grills. I would say if you're within a 1/16, you're probably good. So you can see to the left, my 2 boards, I've got the dados cut. Now we're going to rip them out. We should get 8 out of the short board, and actually I'm going to break one, which you'll see here as we get to the end. Also, mark them off. You want to make sure you line these back up in case your dados are a little off. So I basically just mark them so I know they're in sequence, and then when I assemble it, I can put them back in sequence. If you flipped one and your mortises weren't perfectly located, you're going to have your half laps are going to be a little off. Hopefully that makes sense. And as I put them back over here on the other side of the fence, I realize here that I'm already getting off, so I have to fix them. But as I'm cutting them, I want to place them back in order and just keep them in order. Now keep an eye on this. This is where I get a broken grill. Counting out there, making sure I have enough. Look at the waste, the drop off. I need one more out of this, and you're gonna watch it break. See how I set it down? It looks a little crooked. Frustrating. There's quite a few things that happened in this build that were frustrating, probably because it was rushed. I ended up making another one of those. Didn't show it on camera. Cutting out the long ones, I only need 3 long ones, so obviously I don't have near as wide as a board. Luckily, I didn't have any issues with these. I got all 3 out of this, no problem. There's some kind of hairline crack in the edge of that board in the sapwood that I did not see, so that's the joy of working with wood. Also, I did not show there's a rabbet on the end of all these that fits into that mortise we cut on the mortiser. I basically did that with a dado stack as well. So it's kind of like a little, what I call a stub tenon that just drops into those mortises. So I'm going to assemble this now. You can see how it all comes together. Basically, each one of those little dados is turned into a half lap. And I put glue in there and just tap it together. I really don't use clamps here unless I have to. I have little spring clamps that you know, little pincher clamps you can put on there. I'm going all out here and assembling the whole thing as one frame. You'd be a lot better off just doing the grill, but I think I had 2 days to build this. I'm on day 1, and it is late at night, and I wanted to get it glued up so the morning it was ready to go. It came together fairly well, too. I was actually pretty happy with how well it all worked. It's a little tricky getting these side pieces on because obviously you got to sit here and work each individual grill into its respective mortise, which is a little tricky. Now, if it was a true divided light, each one of these would have its own individual piece of glass and art that went into it, like a door. But that is a ton of work, and I wasn't ready to tackle that, so I'm just making it basically a grill that appears to be like a divided light. All right, so next morning, you might notice that I go to bed late and get up early because this is I'm rushing it. I got to get this done, so I'm putting in a lot of hours. Hand planing off, cleaning up the joints. This is waking up early in the morning and using a hand plane is one of the best things you can do. It's really enjoyable. So I'm not complaining at all for being up early. I probably spent a good 45 minutes just cleaning this frame up, getting those joints leveled out. And then I had to move into a really unenjoyable, loud, noisy, messy job of routing out a rabbet in the back of the frame to accept the glass and basically the board that's going to hold the artwork. I used I think it's actually called a rabbeting bit. It basically has a 3/8 bearing, and then it cuts a wide cutter. So a bearing rides on the frame, and then it cuts in a 1/2 rabbet across the frame. Took about 3 passes, and it's super messy. I need to get dust collection for my router. So you can see the issue you run into is when your bearing hits the grills, you got to jump over them. It's a little bit annoying, but you could cut this rabbet out prior. If this was a door frame and had structure to it, you wouldn't want to necessarily do it this way, because this will weaken the joints at the corner because you're taking a lot of the meat out of the joints. But since it's a frame that hangs on the wall, it's acceptable to do this and quite a bit easier to do it this way. The only downside now is I've got to come back with a chisel and chisel out all those little points where I jumped over the grill, which if you have a nice sharp wide chisel, you can make quick work of it. This chisel I'm using, I bought it off an old German furniture maker that I ran into. He's an old retired man selling all of his tools, and he was just a really cool person. I will never forget that man. I bought several of his tools, and his shop was amazing, and he was obviously very talented, and he was straight from Germany. A lot of people, back in the days, migrated to Texas from Germany. Texas Hill Country is where I live. So I've painted this basically 3/16 paneling board white, and then I'm going to screw it in place, and then I'm going to flip this over, and this is how I'm going to position all the artwork on the frame, and then I'll take it back out. This is time consuming, but if you had a true divided light, it would go a lot easier, but you're going to spend way more time making a true divided light. It's a lot more complex. So basically I just lay out all the art. I've scaled everything in Photoshop to what were we? I forget the size, like 4x3 or something, 4x6, and printed it all out. And so everything goes. The 3 middle ones you can see are actually reversed, so they're a little bit taller because the art is going vertical as opposed to horizontal. Portrait instead of landscape, I think. I used some sticky stuff that I found that I can just stick these down and basically eyeball the spacing and just get them all in position. There's 4 at the top I don't have because I didn't get enough. We'll save those for the future art. So I'm really careful to pull this out and not knock all the art off. I'm not sure how well it's going to hold, but it was stuck on there pretty good. And then I set that aside and drop some glass in. So I didn't really film it, but I ended up breaking this glass. It took 2 rounds to do the glass. I put that backer board back on and actually thought I could screw through the glass into the wood frame. I don't know what I was thinking. I was really tired. It was the end of the day. It was about 4 o'clock. And I called the glass people, and thankfully they cut me another piece of glass before the end of the day because I would not have had this finished. All right, we're in business. If they hadn't have done that. So that was the first piece. I've now put in a second piece of glass, which I didn't show you. And now I'm using I call it glass stop. Basically, I'm screwing on 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch wood material around the outside of the frame. That'll hold everything in place. And then if I need to take it out, I can just unscrew it, pop that stop out, and pull everything out. That works a lot better than trying to drill straight through the backer board, through the glass, and into the wood frame. That was a bad idea. Okay, so there it is. I think it came out looking pretty awesome. One note, I did finish it with lacquer. I sprayed that on there. I think it came out looking really nice. So what I got to do now is wrap it up and give it to the wife, see if she likes it. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the build. I think it came out looking pretty cool. So shoot me a comment, let me know what you think. We'll see you next time.
Open it, Mom. Ready?
Yep. It's gonna go right over our bed. Ah, we'll put it upside down. Pretty heavy. I really hope you like this. Which one's your favorite, June?
And Johnny, your toy's not there too.
I like this one.
The boat one? That's you and Mom.
And there's more for Jenny Buddy.
Yeah, let's pour short.
Oh, that's really cool. Is that your favorite one, Johnny? I love it. The pizza boat! Junie, I love the pizza boat. And Brother Bear?
Yes, those are all my jollies.
Do this.
I got my ways.
This is really cool.
Happy birthday, babe.
Thank you, Andy.
You're welcome.